Hello, and welcome. Welcome
Hello.
to another of our fantastic live tours at Decentraland Art Week. I'm Bay Backner. I'm the head curator and producer at Decentraland, and I'll be leading this tour with two incredible artists, Elisaveta and Carla. We're also going to be joined by Estorick of Right Click Save magazine. So thank you to everybody. If you are just joining us online, if you're watching on the social channels of Decentraland, whether that's YouTube, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it is on X, dive in world now. So we need to jump into minus 140 minus 86. You can just open the Decentraland client, jump in and join us live in Decentraland. You can also access this through decentraland.org/Art Week. The address is on the bottom of the page right here. So I would urge you to be part of the full experience. Come and join us in World itself. Now, to start the tour, we're going to go to a build that we've been talking about a lot over the last 2 days, from our warm-up space where Odie joined us to a lot of the people who've been recommending it yesterday. So we're going to get Elisaveta's and Carla's response to one of our builds, and then we're going to jump into their own builds at Decentraland Art Week. All of these artists came through open calls. Many have collaborated with studios, so we're going to get the whole inside track on what's happened and how these builds came to be. Now, the first coordinate we're going to be jumping to is going to be outside of the build itself, and it is the Odie build at minus 142, minus 89. If you're walking with me in World, you can either teleport right there, or you can walk with me out of the build right now and just come with me around the corner. I am the one that looks like a robot wearing a Grecian head. And the build you want to be going to is this huge build behind us, which looks like a giant portal with the glowing purple doors at the bottom. I'm going to drop the coordinate here in the build. So it's minus 140, minus 88 is where I am right now. And if you're in your world, you can just hit that coordinate and jump right in. I'm going to type it again, minus 88. There we go. Alex, if you're ready, when you're ready, I will add you to the stage. Let me know. And we're going to have an explore of this build. So, Carla, Elisaveta, have you been in this build before? Are you joining me in World as we enter?
Yes, but I am joining only the web version, unfortunately. So I discovered that everybody is in the other parallel reality. So I'm going to fix this. But this one I have not visited yet. No, I have visited most of the builds, which are amazing. But this one is totally new. So a surprise now.
Carla, have you been in this one before?
Oh yes, I'm gonna stay on browser here. Yeah, I'm just blown away by this build. It has so much going on. It has so much amazing layering, and and it's so organic and earthy. The feel for it, and I just love this build. I need to go back and I visited a few times, but I feel like several visits are on order just because there's so much going on, and it all works fantastically. It's really spectacular. It's very exciting.
So, Alex, I'm adding you to the stage so I can get your perspective as someone entering this build for the first time. Background. So, Odie is a mixed media artist. She's very interested in textiles. She's based out of Argentina. The whole build came together in collaboration with one of our most experienced 3D studios in Decentraland called Risk. And I was so cheeky. I've enjoyed my job enormously as the curator of this show because I got to make the matches. So we had this open call. So if you're interested in ever working with Decentraland as an artist, most of our artists come through open calls. So the open call was published, and we asked for artists and curators with an idea, with a concept that maybe never had built in Decentraland before. And so what happened is I paired them with experienced 3D studios to help bring these ideas to life. So Odie, you can see that there's a huge piece of textile on the wall here. If we go into this build, I'm terrible at parkour. Anyone that's been watching these tours will just know how awful I am at parkour. I usually get my sons as a backup parkour expertise to do with me. So we've got this huge textile piece on the side of the build, rotating. And that was the piece that Ori submitted and said, touch grass for me is exploring this tactility, this physicality of the grass itself through these textile projects that she's been creating. And this came out of an artist residency in Argentina with Bosque Gracias, Patagonia artist residency. And if you heard me speak a few moments ago on the Twitter space, you have heard all about Bosque Gracias. So Ori created this piece, and I knew as soon as I received it that I wanted to pair it with Risk. So Risk has done these incredible theme park installations in Decentraland. He's known for his use of teleports to take people high into the sky and see across the vistas of Decentraland, and these really complex 3D models. And he called me. So after I paired Risk and Ode together, he called and said, I have just spent a 2-hour plane journey trying to work out how I'd interpret this piece for a 3D environment. And they started talking, they got together, both Odie and Risk, and this is the intense, crazy, amazing immersiveness that came out of that collaboration. So I wanted to start this tour here to kind of give Alex, I know you're joining us when you can pop up. You're very welcome to start exploring with us. Hello, Alex.
Hi, folks.
Hello.
Hi. Have you met before? You met Elisaveta and Carla?
I don't think so.
No. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise.
Nice to meet you.
Fantastic to bring you all together. And we're starting here, Alex, with this build to sort of show what happens with collaboration. Carla, we'll explore Clara's build during this investigation, was a solo artist, whereas some of our artists in Decentraland Art Week this year have had these intense collaborations between a 3D studio and a 2D or an experimental artist that's been the first kind of entry into virtual worlds. And this is one of those projects right here. So we can see that there's the layers here are drawing on the fact that this piece came out of the residency at Bosque Gracias. So Bosque Gracias have a residency within the rainforests, that they have these camps where artists go each year that do digital residencies, curated NFT projects. A lot of joint creativity came out of them. So Risk has reflected that in this immersive build. And one of the briefs that Ode gave to Risk in creating this was that she wanted the idea of the floor being in the sky, so completely inverting things. So Risk tried to kind of build in both the sense of this being based in the residency in the forests, and then also if we jump into the fountain down here, you can see that we teleport into the sky and have the background to how the textile itself was created by crocheting together the grasses from inside the rainforest. And then you have these incredible views of Art Week at our feet, which we will start very soon to explore. And I can see below an incredible view of one of our next builds that we're going to explore by Elisaveta Sivas. Alex, first thoughts on your exploration of this build in Decentraland right now?
Well, having attended, shall we say, once a year, the first striking thing is that it feels like a kind of a much more open, continuous, almost seamless tapestry of experiences. You know, the work here has something of sort of the marshmallow laser feast in Decentraland feel to me. And it seems to be a very sort of sensitive and immersive without being sort of desensitizing experience. I mean, I think, I think it was maybe 2 years ago now that it felt like a sequence of pavilions, whereas this feels much more unbroken, much more seamless, much more, as I say, like a kind of digital tapestry of different works and experiences, and that is quite striking. I don't know, perhaps you could just say something about how that overall framework has evolved, because I feel like I'm thinking as much about the overall curation as I am about the contributions of individual artists.
Because what we've known each other now for 3 editions of Art Week, I think, in Decentraland. And do you want to give a little bit of background of your connection to digital art, if this is the first time that viewers are meeting you as well, Alex?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I run a magazine called Right Click Save, which is about documenting this sort of moment digital art has become mainstream discourse. Full disclosure, we have a new owner as of a month ago, Tony Liu, and in some ways I think that is also an exciting moment to perhaps pivot slightly towards acknowledging the genuine hybridity of both physical and digital experiences in 2025. And so whereas previously I think we were preoccupied with this sort of new market for digital assets and experiences, now we're thinking a lot about actually the kind of hybrid practices that artists are using these days, which invariably combine analog and digital, haptic experiences, but also printmaking and so on. And so to me, that's sort of that's where we are now. And so coming back to Decentraland is quite interesting, because it seems to me the magazine started as a platform for a more inclusive art world, and at a time when it looks like the digital art space is becoming more developing habits closer to the traditional art world, dare I say, more hierarchy, more gatekeeping, but also more curation in a very benign sense. I think Decentraland does represent this kind of, I don't want to say a sort of vestige, but I think certainly a sort of safe space in what sometimes feels like an increasingly cynical and familiar environment. So for me, I see something of the crypto art ethos in Decentraland, in the sense of a space where artists from all around the world can build careers without necessarily being routed through traditional galleries and institutions, which have a tendency to favor artists who've perhaps gone through familiar kind of global northern channels. And so for all those reasons, Bay, I think the work you've done for a long time is very important. And it feels like every year the Art Week becomes a sort of increasingly important representation of that inclusive vision. And I think the openness that I'm seeing here today continues and expands on that. I don't feel like I'm looking at Decentraland circa 2022. It does feel like an evolving space. So sorry if that went on a bit, but that's my initial response to what I'm seeing here.
Oh, no, I think you've seen how this has developed. You've seen how Decentraland has come from a browser-based platform into a client-based platform, which allows more immersivity in the graphics. It allows a better experience of being in an open world, which is how Decentraland was envisaged. Like from the beginning, we've had these 90,000 parcels of interconnected spaces where people can have that exploratory experience. But the tech previously hadn't been able on most computers to handle.
I think you might be on mute, or
yeah, let me.
I've gone deaf.
I thought it was me.
Okay, let's see. That might have to be an interim.
Yes.
An interim while I get the tech issues sorted this side. Decentraland always conceived of this virtual open world. Tech wasn't there, and now the tech allows artists to truly do that. In most video game environments, you have so many shared assets. So you would have shared textures, shared GLB files, which is why video game environments can be so seamless with much lower requirements for the end machines. Whereas if you're dealing with individual artists in a shared space, all of those artists have individual assets, they have individual textures, they require completely different ways of exploring in those environments, different interactive elements within the code base. So each of those environments have to exist on their own, but also play nicely with everything else around them and have avatars with completely different textures, emotes, and interactivity happening in the same space at the same time. So nothing shared, which is, in a true virtual world, that has to happen. But obviously the requirements of that on a technical system are high. So you can see now we've got to the stage in Decentraland where I don't have to confine a curation to a plaza. I can put it across a full landscape in Decentraland, which is what we've done here, and have those interesting questions about siting, which we've never had before. That finding a site in Decentraland for these artworks was the first question of curation. Where do I put these artworks so that they can exist individually, but also have a narrative between them? And putting them on a map and citing your work, for example, Elisaveta, near the visitor centre. Like, I was really interested to see how you would orientate that work in relation to the other artworks, in relation to the sea. So all of these kind of questions came into place, and I think we should visit it now. So we're going to run around the visitor centre, and straight in front here is your work. Would you like to tell me what I'm seeing here and how I should be interacting with this piece?
Yes, I would like to tell you. It's actually starts with touching the grass, and there is a little piece of grass which one should touch, and then you can go inside the head. But it's very symbolic. My project actually is about very deep knowledge, spiritual knowledge, or knowledge about ourselves. It's the truth about all the humans. So when we touch the grass, it's about consciousness, because people live mostly in autopilot all their life. So when we touch consciously, feel in our hand and the movement, then we start to wake up, we start to feel the body, we start to reconnect our mind with the body. And this is very important, because this leads us to using the full potential of our body and mind, because most of the people now do not use the full potential. So once we use the full potential, we become more healthy, more strong, we create more harmony, and it's not something abstract. It's actually very practical knowledge which anybody could apply and should apply. I really suggest it, because it's improving the life of each individual who wants to go there. So once you enter inside the head, you see this symbolic figure again, and the figure is full of blocks which you should touch symbolically to release the blocks. And you actually, we don't know it, but all our human bodies are full of energy blocks. So once we release them, we feel more lighter, we feel more stronger, we have a lot of energy. And these blocks are released in practices, in meditations. And that's why I want to invite all the people to release those blocks and to improve their life. And this is very important part of awakening to in the path of using the full potential. It's just neurophysiology, nothing mystical. It's just how our brain and body works. We are stuck in beta waves of our mind. So the next step is to activate the creator, all the three forces. And this is actually about the activation of our mind, of all of the waves of beta, theta, alpha and gamma, and once we activate them all, they are all aligned and our brain starts to work in harmony. We become conscious and we can create the reality. And here you come to the final step inside the head, and you create the reality inside, but you see the result in the material world outside. So you can create more harmony touching the heart. You can create more abundance touching the diamond. It's all symbolical. You can create more light touching the sun, and you can create more flowers touching the flower, and then you can go out and see the result outside. And what I want to say with this project is that the energy, our state, is very important. So it's all starts with the energy and with our body, with our mind. Once we are in the right state, we can pass through our body and mind the energy, and then it will go outside and will manifest as materialized reality in harmony, in abundance, in a healthy life, in more contacts, in any project you like, in anything you would like to create here as creator. This is the message of my work. So you are done. You can go out and see what has happened in the reality outside. So you create it inside, change your state, but then you go outside and see the flowers, see the materialization results. Actually, my project is here an invitation for the people to go to do these practices, to connect to their true potential, to use the full potential, because I see many people struggle, they suffer, they start to try to find the solutions outside, and it's always very difficult way. But when we get access to all the parts of our brain, to our subconscious, we can find solutions more easily. And it needs some time for this transformation. And I teach it as a spiritual mentor, but it is worth it to go to the awakening, to go to work with your brain, with your body, to connect with your true self. It's very important for each person, and it's available today. It's very ancient knowledge. It's our common knowledge. It comes from Buddhism times. So my art is about this, and it's amazing that in Decentraland I can make this experience immersive, because this project has a story. I have been developing it with the help of my curator Elisaveta for 4 years already. So this it's already presented as my sculptures, like I have one here in clay. And then it's always also I have stone public art in Italy installed in a hotel, but here the Decentraland lets me insert this immersive experience, and let me show the process a person should take. So the blocks, the activation of the three selves, and the creation of reality from outside. So here is a call to action. Actually, it's the mixture of conceptual art and the spiritual coaching. I'm inviting people. It's not just philosophy. It's not abstract. It's practical. I'm inviting all the people to go and take this path, because you will discover yourself. You will be so potential. You will create anything you want. You will heal anything you want. You can you come here to experience life, to enjoy it. And Decentraland, I think, is the platform. What I want to say, what I really realized about Decentraland is so important, that we are struggling in our society today. Everybody is talking about unity, about integrity, about acceptance of diversity, and about sustainability. And these are very important um, terms, but I see that in Decentraland it already works. It's a model which is already working this way, because Decentraland is very acceptive. It accepts all the possible diversity. It has very different artists from very different background. It is sustainable. It is about nature, and it is uniting. It is uniting people. It is uniting different artists. It is uniting inspiration. So from one side, it is about unity and creating together like one flow. It is about the humanity being together, united. But at the same time, we do not judge. We accept everybody. Anybody is welcome with any background. So I think this is the amazing thing. It's the model of the humanity of the future we are searching for, we are struggling for, but it already exists and works inside Decentraland. So this is very amazing thing about Decentraland for me.
I love how passionate you are,
Yes.
both as an artist. I spoke with your curator this morning, Julia, who's doing such amazing installations in Greece right now and exploring some of these modalities of spirituality in the exhibitions that she's producing with you and other artists. And so for me, it's looking at how you worked with your 3D collaborative studio, because the reality of your art practice right now is majority sculpture. Is that right?
Yes, it's material. It's from clay. So you
So
can see.
seeing a clay artist come into Decentraland and creating something that uses the interactivity and the gamification is fantastic. I also want to highlight how your build, as Alex was saying, interacts with the builds around it. I love how we can have the sense of the shapes repeating in your build with the build behind that we entered, and now we have the shapes echoing throughout, and also how we can see through the sphere of your build, literally through the eyes of the creator, across into the different builds across Decentraland. There's the visitor center. So if you're diving in with us at decentraland.org/Art Week, you will see that the visitor center is the place where you arrive. That was designed by the amazing Over Studio, again, to be this wayfinding way within the open world installation. And we're going to dive out of your build now to see exactly where, now again, my parkour terrible. So let me see if I can jump out
You
of
need
build.
to click the portal. You need
Where?
to click it
Let me click
near the
portal again.
portal. I think there is a click.
It's because I haven't got the UI. There we are. So we come out and then we can see outside the shaft of light. The flowers have grown around the building, which is looking fantastic with the red grass of Decentraland. We have the shafts of light coming through. We have the heart. And you can see how avatars are enjoying this down at the bottom as almost like a park now within Decentraland. Carla, can I bring you in? How are you finding this one so far?
Well, it's really fascinating, to take a physical object and to build this kind of space around it, and with the symbolism. It's really a very thought out and well performed build in terms of that. I think that transparency from inside is just absolutely brilliant. I mean, it's just the perfect way to progress everything to where now we're seeing everything outside. I love it. I think it's really wonderful.
Alex, are you with us? Hi.
Hi.
Thoughts and perspective from the outside of this installation?
Yeah, no, I think, to be honest, I think what's striking about Elisaveta's work, particularly, was this sense in which I think the approach you adopted seemed very much to fit within the kind of the kind of frictionless, porous nature of Decentraland. That notion of kind of embodiment within a digital terrain, but also, not being fixed in position, maybe. So for me, I think that's very striking. I think it's credit to Bay, but I think also the artists for embracing this sort of porous digital terrain. That's not something you can have in a physical environment necessarily. And as a result, some of these works, particularly this work we're looking at right now, they have a different materiality, quite obviously, despite their kind of perhaps references to very early forms of indigenous sculpture. It feels like we're dealing with a kind of porous materiality, which I find particularly heightened this year. I don't know, Bay, whether you feel that perhaps the artists have a literacy for Decentraland as a kind of, almost as a sort of, as a space. Maybe that's something that the teams you pair them with sort of allows. But it seems to me that we're dealing with a lot of Decentraland native artists, as well as a kind of common language. That seems to me to be much more coherent this year. In the past, when I've looked at the work of multiple artists, it has sometimes felt like they are bringing their own language and very much sort of basically transposing it into a Decentraland parcel or pavilion. This year, it feels very much like the artists and this sort of what you could call pretentiously a kind of Decentraland ontology are very much sort of working together. And that's very striking. It feels, I don't know when one work begins and necessarily where it ends. And I don't think that actually comes at the cost of the work. I think, if anything, it kind of reinforces this sort of mutual, this sort of cultural mutuality, this creative mutual space that you've created.
I think that the language, the visual language of Decentraland, I think you're right in that by pairing artists with studios, but not talking for example, Carla, I think, is this your third art week?
No,
second. So I'm going to show your work in a second, we're going to dive in, but seeing these works both from Decentraland, what I would say Decentraland native studios that have been working with us for 4 or 5 years, and then with artists that are new to the space, I think it's about, as you say, Alex, just what is possible isn't immediately apparent if you've never worked in the space before. Like it's quite a hidden layer of tools that for many of our artists opens up as soon as you start playing with Decentraland. For me as a curator and visual artist, it was that immediate sense of, oh, I can do this, I can do that. And unless you've been in Decentraland and experienced what's possible, your practice can't really open up to that. And I think it takes a studio as a guide for some of our newer artists coming in to lay out the toolkit in front of the artist and say, these are the colors, these are the materials that you can use. This is how this can work in practice. These are the interactive elements that you can use, which then allows the artist to innovate within that. But then also you have artists that are entirely Decentraland native that, for example, this is Hayabusa's work, Beneath the Bubble, which has so many layers of interactivity. I'll just show a couple just to show where this artist is taking it. So each of the keyboard controls is integrated in the code as an interactivity within the build, which you would only get as an artist that has been practicing for a considerable amount of time within Decentraland from an arts context. And these are artists that are not necessarily known outside of Decentraland, but they're the real ones that are understanding how GLB objects plus code can create something that goes entirely beyond that as an artistic experience. So if I start experimenting here, I'm going to shut down the daily quest. Obviously, today the quest is part of the show, and so I can float within a flower, which then interacts with the whale. I have trails following me with my interactivity within the build. I can socially join other people on the whale. Let me click back on here. So all of these things become then part of the experience to share within a build and start really becoming part of what's possible in an artistic sense. I think some tools that artists should know about in Decentraland that don't yet are the camera. So if you press C and then U, I can then use that to start exploring the world from perspectives that are completely new. And in doing that, Carla, we see your brutality on my landscape. So Alex, you see the huge box, the box that Carla installed. And I knew that you were going to do something, Carla, kind of different. So I don't know if you noticed in my curation, but I put you on your own in an outcrop. So your build.
I did notice.
Yes.
As you were speaking about how everything's moving together and working, and I'm like, yeah, except for Carla over there with her little isolated box.
I loved it so much. It was one of the joys of the curation, of seeing what people do with their space and placing the builds together. So Hayabusa, luckily I knew from an early stage that Hayabusa's build was work within the context of the more ethereal builds in the center towards the visitor center. Let me jump out of this now. So you escape this camera, and I'm going to jump off the whale and start running over to your build.
The whale is just so amazing. One thing I'm going to jump ahead and just, I feel like I kind of wish I had a little more experience in seeing these, because I had no idea the amount of detail and what you could, it's like I studied everything and I built here once before, but I had no idea, until I saw some of these and I was like, oh, wow. Yeah.
It's the level of interactivity. For example, in the tree here, it looks super simple. This is by Metadoj and Jakob, two collaborating artists, but both with experience within Decentraland. So it seems like a simple installation, but once you jump on the ball, you can then use my parkour again. It's just terrible. Let me get on the ball. So then I can use keyboard interaction again in the style of a video game with E and F to allow me to start navigating the ball between the tree and fly over other exhibitions in this kind of organic sense. So there's these levels of interactivity that I think only come from artists that are deep within Decentraland. But then I love how artists like you, Carla, with the Decentraland experience, you were a mesh fair artist last year.
Yes.
There we go. I've completed another quest step. Yes. So we're head off and we're going to enter, Carla.
Do you remember the Acme? In old cartoons, they'd always have the Acme company, and that's kind of what I was thinking about the lettering on that.
This is what you've done.
Just the blunt.
And I love that you can see it from everywhere within the site as well. Like yours is one of those builds that just talk to that narrative of touch grass. You literally have an arrow which away from the site seems to be saying just touch grass wherever you are within the site.
Oh, I hadn't known that.
That's how I interpret it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
When we come towards it.
I like that. I hadn't thought of it that way. I'm still, thinking of it as my build. That no.
It's like this one sign over the whole space.
Yeah, I like
here.
That. Yeah.
I don't know if you've noticed as well, but the roads are interesting. So when I was installing this place, we as Foundation, we don't have the leases for all of this land. So I only had to work within the spaces that Foundation have leases for. So choosing a site by the sea, because I wanted some of these works to work within a context of looking out over the sea. Particularly, I don't know if you've been to the build by Sarah Shakil and by Clara Bacau that look out over the water and have that interaction with it. But then I had to find a site that had enough spaces for all of the Art Week builds and also enough spaces to connect them with the roads. So OVA had to do this incredibly complicated job of having a road that doesn't look like it just stops in the middle of nowhere, because we don't, like the parcel that I'm on right now isn't owned by Foundation. It isn't leased by Foundation. So I couldn't build on this parcel. So there was this real city planning element to building the show of trying to find brownfield sites that Foundation had maybe experimented on previously, raising them, and then trying to build something digital within those sites itself. So Carla, do you remember when you first put your build in? There was still like weird installations around it, like a children's park. And
it was major parkour just to get inside. Yeah. I thought, I'm pretty sure this isn't going to stay like this.
No. But we had to find a way of flattening those sites. So obviously, as a decentralized virtual world, I can't build over something that someone else owns. And we also found out that I can't reset a site to being the red grass and the trees, because that's rendered via Unity. It's not rendered via the build on the space. So we had to do on the platform level a hack, which meant that if we took out the old sites, I had to mark them as empty on the platform level, not on the build level, so that those trees would re-render around your build.
Wow.
So that is some really interesting kind of tech things. But you'll see that this shop behind your build, I just showed that anyone who wants the alpha, no idea who owns that shop, but
I blocked that pretty well.
they find themselves in the art week. So Arts Mini Mart, if that's you, if you own the shop, we've made you part of the contemporary art landscape now. So Carla, tell me what I'm going to find as I empty. I'm doing silly things with my camera right now. I've got stuck in the
you know, I mean, I as I listen to Elisaveta, you know, it's like, I feel like I'm ultimately also thinking about existential ideas, but really in you know, approaching it from almost the reverse. You know, I'm highly exploring. I have no idea, you know, other than, you know, I believe things matter. You know, that's kind of my basic core, and with nothing else built around that really, other than just, let's see what happens over here. What does this do? What does that do? What does it mean when these things come together? And so that's how I work with art ideas. This was just a loose idea, concrete block shack in the woods. Someone had written a really beautiful piece about their reaction to Kurt Cobain and his music. And the concrete block shack in the woods was just one line, and it kind of referred to like an isolated creativity, if I remember correctly. And that really just really appealed to me. I've been curious to see how it feels with people in it, because I realized I thought of it the whole time as an isolated thing, and then you come back out to Decentraland. So the idea was fairly loosely based on that. I had already for a couple of years been playing around with images for that idea, but I didn't have a real clear idea of what it was beyond that. But this kind of came together as, well, let's just, you know, start with the forested concrete block shack in the woods, literally build that and see where it goes. And so I think for me, it didn't, you know, I like the idea of you come in here to touch grass and you've got this forest, but then in the end, you'll see as we go through the three spaces, we end up in a pure fantasy space. And then you actually leave that space and touch grass in Decentraland. So it kind of did a little bit of a twist on what was the original, you're coming in here to touch grass. So this one's more about, for me, I had a surprisingly aversion to details, and I kind of thought I didn't have an interest in details, and I wish I just didn't. And so I was thinking more in terms of a general mood and tone. And for some reason, that was a real sticking point for me. And especially when I see all the other spaces with wonderful details. But this is just how it went. So, but that's the main thing. I think there's a couple things ended up going on. One was that isolated sense of creativity, which you'll see when we get to Utopia. And then the other, you know, this interior of the concrete block, kind of as I built with it, I was just making images for the walls of the utopian village. And at some point, it just clicked that this is an abandoned business. And so I think of it as like a real estate agency or a travel agency, you know, this abandoned business that kind of once peddled dreams. So, you know, there's a little bit of, you know, some irony in the fact that they're peddling utopia. Again, I don't have a real clear message in terms of what this means. I kind of I'm still figuring out the utopia part. Is it idealism? Is it fantasy and escapism? I think it's both a negative and positive thing at the same time. I think it's staying in flux. And, I don't quite, it's as if I had a dream and I'm waking up and still trying to figure it out. And that's kind of what I want to do and give out, is just, here's an experience that's maybe going to knock you off track, and just bring about this experience that's you're going to think about and wonder and kind of ponder what that means. And you know, so like I said, it's kind of an existential build, but again, it's more exploratory of what is, you know, it's a question at the end of it. And again, there's some irony. It really is funny to see other avatars in here.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Like, how are you finding it? Because obviously I've explored these builds on my own, and now to be in here surrounded by people spray painting, emoting, as someone levitating in a chair, how does that feel as the creator of the space?
Oh, I mean, you know, well, the most funny one was the previous build from last year when we were all packed in there. So I was prepared for it. And the audio is real important also. So definitely visit and the three spaces have 3 different audios, and that again is kind of establishing a mood. I think the final scene is like I said, this one's kind of got the tattered utopian. Oh my gosh. It's really funny to see it in here.
Decentraland's taken it over. They've really reclaimed the concrete block shack.
Yes, I think the theme just changed. I think it's a joyous event now, and that's fine. That's cool. I struggled again with details. I had all these buildings in here and they had nothing in them, and I just didn't want. I struggled, and finally I kind of got the idea. You know, it's about isolated creativity, and so I put a little sketchbook with a pencil in each one with different sketches. They're from sketches I made over 10 years ago. I just had, and I thought they'll work. There is it's not a wearable, it's not minted, but you can download a GLB file of the pond, and if you go into Blender with that file, there is just the way I had made it, the entire dome in there with the white woods. That texture is part of the pond GLB that you download, so you get that texture if you want to recreate that. And then you exit. Like I said, you don't see the signage in here, but there's signage that you exit over on the other building to touch grass again in Decentraland. So again, it was just a matter of going through these 3 moods. I didn't quite plan on the original scene being quite so bleak, but it came out a little bit darker than what I imagined it. But I guess in contrast to the ethereal, again, is it fun, wonderful fantasy, or is it a lost dream, you know, sad kind of thing? I think the contrast turned out being quite strong, and you know, because I didn't really plan that, but I liked it once it happened. Yeah, so.
I think that trying to do bleak within Decentraland and then having people sleeping in your pond is one of the joys. So if you are sleeping in Carla's pond right now, we need some photos of the interaction between the build and that the question of artist intentionality, and then in virtual worlds how that intentionality interacts with avatars and their interaction with the build, I think is a really interesting question.
Again, it was open, you know, it was not necessarily this one path, emotional path forward, you know, and it certainly isn't now.
Alex, I'd love to bring you in here from a curator, from a perspective of your work within digital art. What are you feeling? What are you thinking within Carla's installation?
I mean, Carla, I've been looking through your website, and obviously, forgive me as a kind of fly on the wall, coming back to Decentraland, you know, once a year, I noticed that you're an artist who seems to have been following the evolution of XR technologies quite closely, and I find that to be quite interesting. You seem, you know, to be, as much as any XR artist, native to that kind of porous ontology, if you like. And I wonder perhaps how you feel the space may have evolved this year, how you have responded, how you are choosing to make work perhaps differently now than you might have 2-3 years ago in other worlds. I guess I'm interested from the perspective of an editor who wants to understand the evolution of XR art, but also someone who is interested in visual culture and how, I guess, the media that you are working with have evolved as well.
It's interesting to characterize me as an XR native. I mean, I have been in here for some time now, but I was a painter for 35 years, so I still feel a little bit of an outsider on this. But again, I've been doing this for a while. It's very different to build for Decentraland, and I think for me, I love the challenge of making things performant. And really keeping your textures down and reusing them and everything. So from a practical standpoint, it's very fun to build for that. From a creative or from an artistic standpoint, I think it's a real challenge because even though that's probably why I closed this off, was to have my own little corner where, to pretend to have a little, I mean, Decentraland is a really positive place and my work tends to be not so much. Maybe. And I think the main thing is I'm just, it's not quite as much of a struggle to build things now. So again, that's a practical consideration. It's just, it's that part. I really want things to be more like painting, to where it's just second nature. You're riding a wave of intuition. You don't really have to think about it. You're just doing it. And that's really hard to do with building digital environments, because it's just not as, it's really hard to have a flowing practice. Like you can develop painting techniques where you're really keeping up with your ideas. And so you're able to really uncover some ideas and profound directions that you would not have thought up. I'm really trying to do that. And that's what I've been trying to do for 10 years now. And I think it's getting somewhat clearer, how to do that, because again, there's not the obstacles of just the practical building. I'm better at that now. And also I know where I can just let go of things. I look back at the things I did early on, and in some ways I think, well, you had a little bit more of that flow going back then. I mean, there seems to be an interim where I really tried to learn things. And now I would like to get back to where it's a little looser. Actually, I have been working some with Gaussian splatting because it feels more painterly, and I'm making synthetic environments that I then make Gaussian splats out of. So that's another way to get back to something of an intuitive approach. Which again, that's my goal, is just to be able to work that way with this medium. Which is, again, it's kind of counterintuitive to the way the medium, works.
So when you're working in XR, do you feel as though, whatever the world you're working in or with, the approach you're taking is broadly the same?
The medium's different, but I think so, because I really do just sort of jump in and with not a real clear idea or path usually. And so it's just a matter of some processes are more clunky to work with that way. I mean, I don't feel like, I feel like I'm doing the same thing. I feel like I'm making extended paintings.
Right.
They're allegories, and they're exploratory allegories. It's like it doesn't always work, that doesn't always lead somewhere. It's not a real efficient way of working either.
That's really interesting. I mean, obviously the history of painting in the 20th century was about, to some extent, embracing, maybe the specificity of the medium or the constraints of the medium. And sometimes that gave over into sort of collage or sculpture. I know you've also done sculptures. You've worked with DNA. I'm just wondering, you're not the first person recently who's talked to me about painting in sort of the same breath as XR or digital work. And I just wonder whether you feel that, because you are evidence, I suppose, of the congruence of painting with these kinds of digital experiences. But generally speaking, when people write about digital art, they don't write it within a sort of painterly genealogy. They draw quite clear demarcations between maybe code-based practices and painterly practices, for example. So for me, the fact that you have this kind of this ability to sort of there's a continuum between your XR practice and your painting practice. That's very interesting. I just wondered, maybe you could say just something else about how those two are, maybe one continues the other or reinforces the other or departs from the other, perhaps.
Well, and I became a painter in the early 80s during the neo-expressionism, and I think that played a part, in terms of this being, it's not a narrative, but it's definitely trying to find an allegorical space or event through the process of doing that. I'm sorry, I had a thought and I've just lost it. I apologize. So I think for me, it's always been about that I hate to use the term revelatory, but that's the part that's important to me, is what will this process reveal? And it's a lot of times nothing. A lot of times you go through you do it and then nothing's revealed. But for me, it's carrying on that exploratory process of finding the ideas that are just beyond the ones that you could think up. I don't want to have an idea and do it. I want to push. I shouldn't say push, but I want to explore the ideas that I don't quite know what they're doing, and I want to reveal that. And that works across all the mediums. I think it's just a matter, again, of how clunky the medium is for that type of fluidity. And I think I'm just determined to do it here. Part of that's spatial. I realize that some of this also from childhood on is this fascination with an imaginary space. And that, again, goes through the paintings into the virtual reality. And that's probably the most solid connection for me, is that fascination with an imaginary space. Is it past? Is it present? It's the kind of space when you read a book, if you visualize, and I guess not everyone does, but if you visualize, you read a book, you see a space, and it may be one from life, it may not. That's really fascinating to me, So that's probably one of the strongest connections between the mediums.
That's great.
Now, I feel like this conversation could go on for so much longer.
Yeah, definitely.
We have 2 minutes to kind of wrap this together. It's been an absolute pleasure to have the three of you with us on this interactive tour. I would love for you to finish with the one thing that you hope someone who perhaps is new to virtual art and new exploring Decentraland for the first time, what's the one thing that you would hope that they take away, maybe from the event in general or from your build specifically? Elisaveta, could I start with you? What would you hope someone takes away from yours?
Yes, I hope that from my build, people take the inspiration for transformation, for going deeper, connecting to themselves and to the energy, and exploring this part of their true self. And this is a wonderful possibility for me to present this project. Even I'm artist who is not familiar with the digital world, but Vegas City Studio and Decentraland made it possible to inspire people. So it's wonderful for me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for being part of it.
What I wish.
Carla, how about you?
I think it's both. It's very similar to reality, but at the same time, it's a completely jarring reality. And especially, go get a headset. I think in general, just the whole idea of just a virtual space reality. Again, it's rooted, it's founded, it's real, but it's also very jarring. And anytime you can change your perspective dramatically, is a really good thing, I think.
Alex,
What's the question?
what do you hope people would take away?
I think people will take away this sense of Decentraland as a space for where artworks can be viewed in this kind of expanded sense, not constrained by traditional or even digital skeuomorphs. That when I remember we've talked about this sort of for many years, this idea of perhaps one of the things that virtual worlds need to rid themselves of is this sort of tendency towards replicating physical environments, white cubes, sort of gravity and these sort of skeuomorphs that are so fundamental to physical production. And seems to me like, for me at least, coming to Decentraland in 2025, it seems like you've come much, much closer to a space where artists can rid themselves or kind of untether themselves from those constraints that they might have previously been preoccupied with, but also perhaps the tendency to sort of want to replicate in digital form what they might have also done in physical form. I think particularly it seems to me with Carla's work, you're here as an artist who clearly, having worked in multiple media prior, it seems to me is well suited to continuing that focus in this environment, extending that the logic that has guided you throughout your career. I think if it seems to me if all of the artists on Decentraland were, as it were, Decentraland artists from year one, then I would be skeptical as to what we were thinking about. But I think having artists who are moving into Decentraland or other virtual worlds as an increasingly native, creative praxis, that seems very positive. And I also would say, just at a moment when we're really trying, I think, to normalize digital hybrid practices within the mainstream contemporary art world, so artists can get paid and be acknowledged as artists. I think the fact that we have, serious artists who have worked across both physical and digital domains participating in the Art Week is immensely validating. So it seems to me, as ever, Decentraland feels like an inclusive space at a time actually where I see exclusivity and sharp elbows returning. For me, it's immensely reassuring and grateful to you for the time today.
Oh, thank you so much, all of you, Elisaveta, Carla, Alex, for being part of this. We're diving back into worlds. So if you're with me on the live tour, the next workshop has started at the Art Week Visitor Centre at decentraland.org/Art Week. Jump in there or go to -140, -86. I'm going to be jumping there now. The next workshop is all about that inclusivity. So how to start promoting and opening your gallery in Decentraland. Remember, if you were with us yesterday, we had our first build tutorial using the template. This is how to get it started in Decentraland itself. Then I'm coming back in an hour's time with some curator secrets, some insights for you about how to get selected for art shows. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And I will see you at the next workshop. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks,
nice to meet you all.